الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله
إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأن محمدا عبده ورسوله اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا وحبيبنا وقرة أعيننا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم أجمعين. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. All praises to Allah. We thank Him, we worship Him, and we ask Him for His forgiveness. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to send blessings and salutations upon the Prophet, our beloved Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and as the angels do as well. O you who believe, fear Allah as He should be feared, and do not die except on the state of Islam. You see, brothers and sisters, as the year comes to an end, it's natural for us as humans to start reflecting upon our actions, and to start reflecting and thinking about what we have done, what we didn't do, and what we wish we would have done. And this is something natural that we do as humans when anything comes to an end. And so as Muslims, we're encouraged to constantly be reflecting, constantly be thinking about what we have done, and what we could be doing better, and how we could be improving ourselves. Especially on certain things, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds us, such as to be reminded to think and constantly think about things like death, for example. For example, we're actually reminded to recite a number of surahs such as Surah Yasin, Surah Al-Waqiyah, Surah Al-Hashr daily, to be reminded about death and how it is coming and how we can never be prepared for it. And so these are things that we should be constantly thinking about, because if we're not thinking about things like death and the world around us, then how can we be knowing that we should be worshipping Allah? How can we prepare for them if we're not remembering them constantly? So it's somewhat of a problem when, in the day-to-day where people really don't think about death and think about how they're going to die. Obviously there are some connotations towards it. There's, you don't want to think about it at the dinner table when you're eating with your family. But these are things that we should be remembering and things that we need to be constantly thinking about. Because if we're not thinking about how and what state we're going to die in, then how are we going to prepare for it the way that we want to? Now, this idea of New Year resolutions, at its essence, it's a very good thing. It's encouraging you to think about what you've done, how you spent the last year, and what you want to do moving forward. How do you want to improve yourself? And so, at its essence, it's a really good thing that we as Muslims should be encouraged to do. However, this idea of New Year's resolutions and the connotations around it specifically, it can be somewhat negative and not beneficial, because there are certain cultures around it, certain ideas that we hold about it. For example, the idea that these New Year resolutions, they never take place. You make the intention, you make the goal to go to the gym every day. You're going to lift 100 pounds. I don't know, whatever you have. And then by the second week or by the first day, you don't do it. And so ideas like this are kind of negative, because you're already stepping into an action knowing that it's going to fail. And so if you actually want it to go well, you have to have some kind of hope that it's going to be good. Now, what this culture of like New Year intentions kind of represents is this idea that we do not really know how to make good goals. And this is a problem for us in general. And I even remember when I was in high school and middle school, they tried teaching us, they taught us down, they sat us down and tried teaching us, this is how you make a goal. Here's a system, here's a process of making goals. And I just remember all of us, I don't think there was a single person there who was like, I'm taking this seriously. Everybody joked about it, everybody laughed about it. They were like, what am I getting out of this? This is pointless. So it's problematic that, my generation, and I did this as well, we don't really know how to make good goals. And so, and especially when we're talking about this from an Islamic point of view, making goals is extremely important within Islam. As in the hadith, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ, our actions are based on our intentions. And so all of our actions should have a goal in mind. All of our actions should have a certain cost, a certain hadaf, a certain thing that we're working towards. And so, and you find this in Islam, the idea of goal making and, working on yourself and trying to improve yourself is something you find in Islam over and over and over again. And in fact, it's considered like one of the major things, our scholars would work on, and those who know Allah and those who are close to Allah have gone through this process of making goals for themselves and working on themselves and purifying themselves. In fact, it's an entire science that has been studied for centuries and centuries by our ulama into the science of tazkiyat an-nafs, or if you want to translate that as purification of the soul, or or improving yourself. And it's similar to what you would find in the West. In the West, you would call like self-help. You find this in the West, and you find this talked about, and there are books written on it. However, obviously, there are differences between what we would call self-help and tazkiyat an-nafs, or Islamic purification of the soul. And the main difference that we find between them is that obviously the Islamic tazkiyat an-nafs is trying to prepare you to meet your Lord and to get closer to Him, so that you can have peace and salam and sakina in the afterlife. However, the Western self-help is mainly trying to get you ready for this world, trying to make you happy in this world, and it's just trying to make you at peace with yourself. It's not really preparing you or motivated by an exterior goal or a higher motive. And so this is extremely important, that when we're trying to purify ourselves, we're trying to make goals for ourselves, we're trying to improve ourselves, that we're going to our Islamic sources, we're going to Islam first before we go to other people. Because how are you going to rely on non-Muslims, people who do not believe in Islam? How are you going to rely on people who don't even have a great conception of who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is when you want to get closer to Him? How are you going to go to somebody who doesn't believe in Islam? How are you going to rely on them with something as intimate, as spiritual, as important as your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And this is kind of indicative towards the problem within the Muslim Ummah that has been a part of it for centuries, which is this idea, this false idealization of westernization or modernization. Oftentimes we look at the Western way of doing things, modern way of doing things, as the ideal way of doing things. We look to it and we're like, this is the best way. We try to copy them. And this is a very problematic idea. And this has been part of the Muslim Ummah for centuries. You look even just in history, look at the Ottoman Empire. The main reason why they fell, as historians would say today, the main reason why they ended up falling in the early 20th century was because over centuries, they inculcated a lot of Western values and a lot of Western systems into their government and into their systems of order. And I actually wrote my entire, I took Islamic history this last semester, and I wrote my entire final paper on some of the changes the Ottoman Empire made to the empire during the later part of their reign. And so this is just to show that we need to try to get out of this mindset that the West and modernization is the main way to go, and that we should be trying to copy the West in every single manner, because that's not always the case. And one of our teachers, he made this example of like a lot of the masajid in the U.S. that when they engage in interfaith work, one of the main communities they try to interact with are actually like white evangelical Christian groups. That's like the most engaged with group. And so we're still in this idea that if we can, get a good connection with the white evangelical Christians that were set in the U.S. So it's something that we need to reflect on. It's something that we need to look into ourselves and see, is this really something that's in my heart? That I kind of look up to the West, I'm trying to copy them, I'm trying to copy, the people around me in every sense. Because our deen of Islam is perfect. It's perfect, and it's completely despite what other people have to say about it. So, getting back to this idea of resolution, trying to purify ourselves. If the New Year's or the end of the year or New Year resolution, this whole kind of culture, if that's what's going to get you to start thinking deeply, if that's what's going to make you sit down and look back at your life and think about every interaction you had with somebody and whether or not that was good or bad, whether or not you left them crying or crying in tears of sadness or crying in tears of happy and joy, then it's a good thing. Alhamdulillah for New Year's. Alhamdulillah. It's making you think about it, it's making you reflect, and this is essential to Islam. And so, however, the idea that you should only be doing this once a year is problematic in itself, because that's never the way things have to go. There's a saying in Islam that says, "Man arafa nafsahu arafa Allah." Those who know themselves know Allah. And so, if you're starting the year with one goal in mind, and you say you're going to keep that throughout the entire year, it's become problematic because you don't know if you're able to maintain that goal yet. And if you start with a goal and you realize you're not capable for it, that doesn't mean that you're incapable for anything. You're not able to do anything to it. It just means you're not able to attain the goal that you want in the first place. You've learned something about yourself, and now you can adjust your goal towards something that's more feasible for you. And so the first step in trying to inculcate anything into your life and trying to attain consistency in anything is first by knowing what you're able to be consistent with. So if you know that you're someone who's you're coming right out of Ghafla, you're coming right out of heedlessness, you're just converted to Islam or something like this, and you make the intention, I'm going to pray all my 5 salahs in the masjid, I'm going to read a juz of the Quran a day. You can make that intention for yourself, you can make that goal for yourself, but most likely, unless you're you've been chosen or something special, you're not probably not going to be able to do that. You're probably only able to do much less. Eventually, you try to work yourself up to something higher. But the point is, if you don't know yourself, then you won't be able to make a good goal for yourself. And if you can't make a good goal for yourself, then you can't attain consistency. And consistency is the other important thing in this discussion as well. You have to, like I said, you have to pick something you can be consistent with. And there's this whole, this idea that if you can, the quality is better than quantity, right? If you can do something small but consistently, it's much better and much more beneficial for you, rather than if you do something big and once, right? And so this is found within our tradition over and over again. Doing something small and consistent is better than doing something great but once. And so these are things that we need to be remembering when we're engaged in trying to perfect ourselves. And in fact, in the science of tazkiyah and in the science of purifying your soul, the ideas around, there's this idea that says if you can do something consistently for 40 days, any habit, any kind of thing you want to inculcate in yourself, if you can do it for 40 days consistently, then you have mastered it. And then you can move on to the next thing. And so it's this idea that you're doing one thing for 365 days is not really something that will get you somewhere far in the end of the day. You want to continue improving yourself. Because there's also this idea that says that if today is not better than yesterday, then you haven't made proper use of today. And so it's important that we are constantly trying to improve ourselves and not only sticking to one goal, and we're constantly seeing how can I improve myself in the entire year. And so this idea, and going back to this idea that is mentioned within our tradition, that you do something for 40 days consistently. This is actually something you see in this has been proven by modern science as well. If you can do something for 40 days, you try to inculcate that habit for 40 days, it can actually become a part of you. It'll be something that you can do easily. It's become a part of you at this point. And this is the same idea with Ramadan. We do something for 30 days. The best advice people give for Ramadan is doing, one thing, at least one thing every day of Ramadan consistently. And we got the notification, recently that Ramadan is not that far away. It's just over 3 months away now. And it's not a crazy idea at this point to actually be thinking about Ramadan. There's this tradition that says that the Sahaba, I'm not sure if Sahaba, but there's this idea that the first 6 months after Ramadan, you're making dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He accepts Ramadan. And the 6 months before Ramadan, you're making dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to see Ramadan. and you're planning for it. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to see Ramadan. So this idea of like doing something consistently for 40 days is actually something that we find in Ramadan. And so there's this it's a problematic idea that, at the end of Ramadan, on Eid al-Fitr, there's this idea everybody has that, oh, alhamdulillah, we're finally, going back to a normal lifestyle, going back to normal. That's extremely problematic, an extremely problematic idea that, we're going back to the normal lifestyle, things will go back to normal and I can kind of forget everything I've done. And it's a very problematic, because you just spent 30 days working on yourself, creating a good habit, just to forget it and lose it all. It's like you work really hard towards something. Like, let's say for a class, you work the entire semester. You work the entire semester working on your grades, making sure you learn something, just to not study for the final. When you already have a mastery over the subject, but then at the end of the day, when you come to the final, you don't try it. And there's actually an idea that our ulama speak of that is that, to see what it's a sign of whether or not your Ramadan has been accepted is whether or not you're able to maintain some of those habits that you had in Ramadan outside of Ramadan. One of the signs to see whether or not your Ramadan has been accepted or not is to see whether or not you're able to maintain some of those habits that you had in Ramadan outside of Ramadan. And so this is why that idea, that sunnah of fasting 6 days in Shawwal, the month that comes after Ramadan. If you can fast the month of Ramadan and then 6 days in the month coming after it, it is as if you have fasted the entire year. SubhanAllah. And so some of the ulama would say if you find yourself fasting those 6 days, and if you've completed those 6 extra days, then it's also a sign that you have fasted your Ramadan, your Ramadan has been accepted with the same idea. And so there is a lot to be said about goal setting and things like this. And when we talk about the things I've mentioned so far is that we should be going to our Islamic sources to learn about how to improve ourselves, because that's where we'll find the real truth. Because this is what our ulama have gone over for centuries. And this is the other amazing thing about our Islamic intellectual history is that the Islamic civilization has been focused on the preservation and the acquirement of knowledge for so long and so intensely that basically any question that we have about Islam today has probably been answered hundreds of years ago. SubhanAllah. And you may think that you have this unique question that's never been asked before or something like that, but you just have to look. It's actually in there. It's probably mentioned, things like tazkiyah al-nafs and things like self-help. They're mentioned by scholars like Imam al-Ghazali and the like. So it's really something unique about our tradition and something we need to be appreciative of. We have our Islamic tradition and our scholars have worked for hundreds of years. And it makes no sense for us to just, ignore them and to, throw them under the rug and just say they were scholars of a long time ago. They have no relevance today. They should be things that we constantly invoke and constantly, go back to for help. And so going to our Islamic tradition is the first thing we should be doing when we're trying to better ourselves. Now, furthermore, we also mentioned this idea that you need to learn yourself. Learn about yourself. Man arafa nafsahu arafa Allah. Whoever knows himself knows Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so if you know yourself, then you're able to, you're able to know your weak points. You're able to know what you actually need to work on and what you're actually capable of in order to attain consistency. And that's also one of the great things about Ramadan. Is that the shaitan is locked up. The shaitan isn't there. He's not something you have to be worried about. And so any sin that you see yourself committing in Ramadan is just you. It's not, you can't blame shaitan, you can't blame anything else. Any sin, any problem that you see that taking place inside the month of Ramadan is not the shaitan, it's just you. So you know at that point during Ramadan what's the problem within your heart. What's the problem within your heart? What's the problem in your nafs? And what's the shaitan? And so this is extremely important to be aware of. And so when we're going to Ramadan, inshallah, it's important to keep this in mind. Look at yourself, reflect on yourself, and see what am I doing wrong, and know that that's just you, and that's something that you need to work on. And then the other idea is that you should be doing something consistently. And obviously, we say that doing less is more. Doing a little bit a day is much better than doing something a lot once. And that's not an excuse to do little. Like we said, if you're able to do more, that's always better. But but obviously consistency is the goal. And if you can do something for 40 days, then that's kind of like what our teachers have told us. Now, when we talk about making our goals, we should also discuss what kind of goals we're making and what goals are we looking towards. And there's a hadith, and it's mentioned in the Arba'in, the Nawawi of Imam Nawawi, which is they're called like the 40 pillars of the deen. They're extremely important for our religion. And this is at the end of the hadith, where I'll say it in Arabic. It says, "Ala wa inna fi jasadi mudghatan. Ala wa inna fi jasadi mudghatan. إذا صلحت صلح الجسد كله وإذا فسدت فسد الجسد كله ألا وهي القلب." Indeed, in every body, indeed in the body there is like a clot. If you purify it, you have purified the entire body. And if you have destroyed it, then you have destroyed the entire body. Indeed, it is the heart. And so when we're trying to work on ourselves, our end goal should be trying to work on the heart. Because as mentioned in the hadith, if we can work on the heart, if we can purify the heart, then we have purified the entire body. And it is the central point in our entire lives. And so any act that we do will have an impact on the heart. And if the heart is in a good state, then everything else is easy. And if the heart is in a bad state, then everything else is difficult. And so it's really important that we're focusing on the heart and focusing on trying to improve our heart. Wallahi, if you focus on the heart, then everything else will come, in this life and the next. And so when we talk about specific things that we really need to be working on when it comes to, trying to improve our hearts, it's things that there are specific things we need to be focusing on and things we need to be prioritizing. And the first and foremost things that we need to be working on are the fard things, the things that have been made obligatory to us. Those come first before anything, and the reward for those things are more than anything. And these are things like the 5 daily salahs, and things mentioned in the 5 pillars. We have to make sure those 5 things are complete before doing anything else. And even with the salahs, there are some goals that we can make with those things. Obviously, we want to try to make them to the best quality that we can, right? But even with the salah, if you're struggling to pray 5, then pray 4 with the intention of going to 5. And if you keep struggling to pray 4, pray 3 with the intention of going to 4 and then the intention of praying 5. This is something that our scholars mentioned. It's not just me saying, giving you a fatwa or something. So just knowing that there's always some progress that can be made when it comes to these things. And then of course, after doing the fard things, you need to make sure that you're reading some Quran, some ayah, something daily, something that you're reading consistently. This is the first thing before anything else. Our Sheikh Hamza Yusuf, he's always telling us as Zaytuna that that the one if you're doing anything else, if you don't have it consistently reading like a lot of Quran, then you should leave anything else that you're doing, because that reading of the Quran is basically what's going to save you on the Day of Judgment, and that's really what's going to send you forward. And so there's actually there is this it's a lot in the past. What was considered the norm and like the very minimum for someone was to read a juz a day, like what we do in Ramadan. Reading a whole juz a day, so that every month you would finish the Quran. And this is actually a tradition still kept up in some countries like Morocco, where they read a half a juz in the morning at hizb and a half a juz in the afternoon in unison. And it's a beautiful tradition that still takes place in most masajid in Morocco. So that's a really amazing thing. And they say that if you're not doing a one khatam or one reading of the entire Quran at least once a year, then you have left the Quran. So it's important that we're trying to read the Quran consistently and constantly. Because this is what this is at the end of the day, this is the message that was sent down to us from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so that we would read it and so that we can reflect on it and implement it into our lives. And after you've done, you've maintained a good amount of Quran in your life, then you should also do salawat and things like that, adhkar, and reflecting constantly. And the salawat itself is also extremely important. It's something that everybody needs to be doing. We need to show our gratitude to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And we need to be remembering him every day. This is our Habib. We're supposed to love him more than we love our mother. So this is something we need to really look into ourselves. Do we love our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam more than we love our family and more than we love anything from this dunya? So these are things that we need to be constantly reflecting on. And obviously we need to also be thinking about instilling righteous characteristics within ourselves and dispelling like hatred and things like this from our hearts. Now, like I mentioned a little bit earlier, that the heart and improving yourself is extremely important, and there's a lot that can be said about it. And everybody has their own kind of ways about going with it. They know themselves, and so if you have anything extra to give, I would be more than interested to hear it. And everybody has their own things that work for themselves. So if you have any advice for this, I'm more than open for it, inshallah. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sallam. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا وحبيبنا وقرة أعيننا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم أجمعين. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. So the main idea that I'm trying to get us to think about when it comes to goal setting and thinking about how to reflect on ourselves is that this is something we need to take seriously. This is our akhirah that we're talking about here. And it's something that we should be and when I say taking it seriously, I mean that this is something that we should be prioritizing. This is something that we need to be organized with. And it's not something that I'm just like, okay, today I feel like reading the Quran, today I feel like doing salah, today I feel like going to the masjid. This is something that we need to be doing consistently. We need to prioritize it in our lives. And this also needs to be something we're organized with. SubhanAllah, we're organized with everything else in our lives. Our students, some of our students, one of our students, Hamad, they're very organized. But SubhanAllah, we're not as organized with our deen. So, it's important that we're using the same things that we learn like in school about being organized to be organized with our deen as well. Make charts, have goals, have a journal that you write in daily that says, okay, how was I with my goals today? Was I able to do the reading of the Quran today the way I like to? Was I able to, was that dialogue I had with somebody beneficial or was it problematic? And there's an important thing to remember when we're talking about progress and trying to improve ourselves. And this is mentioned in the Hikmah of Ibn al-Farad. It says that basically, I'm going to summarize it, it's the idea that when you are finding yourself in success and you're doing well with your goals and you're close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that's when you should be worried. That's the time when you should be careful. Because that's the time, because you cannot take, these things from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala lightly. Those are times you need to be worried. Because at that point you're more susceptible to, falling into ghafla. You cannot, ascribe your success to yourself, and you always have to remember that this is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala only. These are only things the success is only from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you should be open, if you're in success and you're doing well, then you should be worried that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will take it away from you. So you should be more heightened towards, you should be more worried about losing it. And when you find yourself failing, when you find yourself, not successful in your goals, and maybe you miss your salah, you're not doing well in your goals, that's when you should not get depressed. That's when you should be hopeful in the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so it's always remembering that, Islam is you have to be like a bird. You need to have fear and hope and love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in order to succeed. Inshallah. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us those who attain istiqamah and attain consistency. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us those who listen to this speech and make the best of it. اللهم اهدنا فيمن هديت وعافنا فيمن عافيت وتولنا فيمن توليت وبارك لنا فيما أعطيت وقنا شر ما قضيت إنك تقضي ولا يقضى عليك إنه لا يعز من عليك ولا يذل من وليت تبارك ربنا وتعالى نستغفرك ونتوب عليك ربنا اغفر لنا ذنوبنا وكفر عنا سيئاتنا وتوفنا مع الأبرار ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار يا مقلب القلوب ثبت قلبنا على دينك اللهم إنك عفو تحب العفو فاعف عنا اللهم إنك عفو تحب العفو فاعف عنا اللهم إنك عفو تحب العفو فاعف عنا ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم وأقم الصلاة.
الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله. الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد
لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين
آمين.
لو أنزلنا هذا القرآن على جبل لرأيته خاشعا متصدعا من خشية الله وتلك الأمثال نضربها للناس لعلهم يتفكرون هو الله الذي لا إله إلا هو عالم الغيب والشهادة هو الرحمن الرحيم هو الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الملك القدوس السلام المؤمن المهيمن العزيز الجبار المتكبر سبحان الله عما يشركون هو الله الخالق البارئ المصور له الأسماء الحسنى يسبح له ما في السماوات والأرض وهو العزيز الحكيم الله أكبر سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إذا جاء نصر الله والفتح ورأيت الناس يدخلون في دين الله أفواجا فسبح بحمد ربك واستغفره إنه كان توابا الله أكبر سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Just a quick announcement, inshallah. We might be praying Asr now because of the weather, so just hang around. We're going to pray Asr immediately, inshallah. We have a guest speaker who came tonight from Florida, is that right? He's a professor at the Florida University and also a Islamic author, and some of his publications are by Yador, and he will be our speaker tonight, inshallah, at 7 p.m., inshallah, after Isha prayer. He would like to address you, inshallah, for a few minutes. Please give him your attention.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you very much for letting me come and talk to you. Tonight we're going to talk about, in part, what the Hadith was talking about today, how to love ourselves. Over the period of last 200 years, 250 years, we completely have forgotten